All right, welcome Big Deuce soldiers and family members who are joining us online for virtual date night. Originally, about a month ago, we were planning to do a real date night with food and childcare and a lesson and activities and whatnot. With the COVID-19 and social distancing, we've had to kind of adjust fire a little bit. But so instead, what we're going to do is we're going to record two videos, one for dating relationships, one for married relationships. And joining us is going to be my wife, Maddie, who's agreed to help out, so we're excited about that. But as I said, we did have to adjust fire, but we still wanted to make sure that we were reaching out to you guys. And here's why. The why behind it is because as we record this video on dating relationships, I know from talking to soldiers in our formation that dating can be a stressful thing. Me and Maddie both remember that as well, right? That dating can be stressful. I remember myself, I know from talking to some of you guys, right, that the fear of rejection, the fear of just the awkwardness, facing those feelings that we get every once in a while just of loneliness, of the conflict that can come up during dating, I know that it can be a stressful thing. But yet when we do it right, when we do things the right way, and when we eventually find that one person who we're going to spend the rest of our lives with, it makes it so worth it. And it makes dating really one of the most fun times of life. When you find that one person, and when you start your journey together, when you start to build that life together, and everything's new and the world is wide open before you, man, it makes it worth it. And so if you're sitting there tonight and you're watching, maybe you're watching with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend, the person you're dating, maybe you're watching by yourself, and you're kind of feeling that stress, man, I want you to know that through what we're going to be talking about through this video, as we kind of give advice that we've learned along the way, as we give advice on some ways to stay safe as you date, that it can be so much fun when it's done the right way. It can be so meaningful and life-changing. And so if you are one of those people that's struggling under this stress, there's hope, and hopefully we will address some of those things to make it a little less stressful through this video. And so as I mentioned, right, the whole goal, in my opinion, of dating is to find the right one, finding that one person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, hurrying. It doesn't mean that you have to be in a rush. It doesn't mean that has to be on the forefront of your mind all the time. But I do believe that that's the goal of dating. That dating is set up that we can find that right person that God has for each one of us. And so with that, again, I believe you don't have to rush, you don't have to hurry, but I think that when we get into the casual mindset, that dating is just this casual thing, that starts to build different habits, it starts to build different mindsets on relationships as a whole, that when you do find that right person, we can kind of bring those past habits in and kind of approach it with a casual mindset when it's time to start getting serious. And so I do think that the big purpose of dating is to find that right person. And as we start to go on that journey of finding that right person, there are risks involved, right? Dating does have its risks. And being soldiers here at 2-2 in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, I think that there's three realities that we face. The first reality is that, being here in Lawton, Oklahoma, it's not the most dangerous place in the nation by any means, but it's also not the safest. And so we need to be mindful of, where are we going? Who are we talking to? Because there are those risks posed here in Lawton. And so a couple of things that we can do to mitigate those risks, right? We can always tell a battle buddy, tell someone we trust, hey, I'm going on a date with this person. We're going at this time. We're going to this place. Just kind of making sure that someone else knows where you're going, who you're going with. Another thing that you can do is just to do your homework. One of the great things with social media is people put their lives out there online for us to kind of do our homework ahead of time, start to see, is this a person that I really trust going out with? And then the third thing I would say is always go to a public place, right? Don't go somewhere secluded, don't go somewhere private, go somewhere public, so that way you always know, hey, there are safe options around me. The second reality that we face, just being soldiers here, is that there are people who want your benefits. That's a reality that we have as soldiers who are dating, is that people do want your benefits. Just as much as you want to eventually get that BAH and get out of the barracks, there are people here in Lawton, Fort Sill area who also want that BAH, who also want those benefits that you're entitled to. And so you need to be, as you're dating, asking the question, do I really trust this person? Are they really in this relationship for the right reasons? And then the third reality that we're facing is just being in the technology era. We have all these access to different dating apps. We just need to be making sure that if you are using dating apps, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't necessarily, but if you are using dating apps, that you're just staying safe. You know, there's such a problem right now where just anybody can be sitting in their basement making fake profiles and scamming soldiers or scamming people out of money or whatever it may be. And so a few things to keep in mind as you're using dating apps is to, first off, never give any compromising information, never give any financial information online. And that really goes if you're using dating apps or not. You know, you should never be giving financial information out as you just start dating. But never giving out those compromising information, never giving out financial information. And then it never hurts to be a little old school too. If you meet someone on a dating app and you're ready to meet up and go on a date, it doesn't hurt to give them a call. Talk to them over the phone and just make sure you know who it is that you're going to be going out with if you are using those dating apps. And so while there are risks, while there are things that we need to be cautious of, at the same time, we shouldn't let the risks keep us from going for it, right? Because while we do need to make sure that we are staying safe, we can't let things like the fear of rejection or the fear of awkwardness keep us from dating. And so I remember when, me and Maddie first started dating, I didn't know her that well. And so I did kind of go out on a limb. Now, we did kind of know, we were both in the same church, and so we did know kind of friends of friends and things like that. But as we first started dating, I did have to take a risk in asking her out. I did have to kind of go for it in a sense. And life is too short. As soldiers, I understand we don't really want to talk about, we don't really want to admit that we're afraid of rejection, that we're afraid of awkwardness, that we're nervous. But let's just be honest, that's the reality that each one of us encounters. Right? If we're being honest with ourselves, we all experience those types of feelings, but life is too short to keep us from going out on that limb, from taking that risk. And now Maddie's going to kind of talk about how that kind of was in the beginning for us as we first started dating.
Yeah, so I think for us, we felt comfortable enough to go on a date even though we didn't really know each other because, like you said, we kind of ran in the same circle at church and we had a lot of mutual friends. So it wasn't like we were going out with a complete stranger. And it's why he felt comfortable asking me out even when we didn't really know each other. But we were cautious in that on our first date, we went to dinner at a public place. Our second date was at a public place. Our third date was not really a date, but it was like a church event with friends around us. So we took things slow when we got to know each other and established some trust first. But then we also didn't let those, feelings of fear hold us back beyond the common sense things to keep ourselves safe. We didn't let any fear of awkwardness or anything keep us from putting ourselves out there. And it was awkward at first, but I think it always is those first few dates. And then it's always worth it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you kind of go through this and you start to maybe be thinking, this is somebody that I could see myself spending the rest of my life with and whatnot, it's important to start having some worldview conversations. All right, a worldview conversation. Really, your worldview is simply put how you see the world. And as you first start dating, you might have some fun. You might have some similar interests, some similar hobbies, and that's good and that's great. But eventually we need to get to the point where we start having some of those serious, maybe awkward conversations. Things like religion, things like politics, things like family. Because, you may have some fun hobbies, you may have just some fun shared interests, but when it really comes to a relationship getting serious, your worldview is crucial. Because your worldview defines what you believe about yourself, what you believe about other people, what you believe about marriage, about dating, what you believe about raising a family. It defines every way of how you see the world, and it starts to affect your goals. It starts to affect your plans for the future. And so if we stay away from those awkward conversations, you could really be getting yourself in a bind later on. And so things like family, religion, politics, some of these things, they might feel awkward at first, but they're crucial and they really affect every aspect of our lives. And so, Maddie, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Right, yeah. I think the biggest similarity in worldview for us was, and still is, religion. And it's something that we both came into the relationship knowing that we wanted to be with someone who was also a Christian. And so then that bleeds into other examples of worldviews that needed to be similar for us, like morals and ethics and politics, that kind of thing. And these are all things that we agree on for the most part, and it's important that we do because our beliefs and opinions in these areas, like you said, they directly affect how we live our lives and how we make decisions. So, a pretty big example of that is how we'll raise any kids that we might have in the future. We both know that we want to raise our kids in the church and that we want to raise them with certain beliefs and morals. And that's something that would have caused major conflict in the future if we had different worldviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this isn't necessarily like the first time you go out with somebody like, who are you voting for in this election? Or, all these different things, right? But like Maddie said, if we avoid some of these serious conversations about worldview and just about the way that we see life, down the line, it's going to lead to conflict. And, you're never going to fully 100% align with every single person. That's just not possible. But having some of these shared worldviews and shared values are so important. And, it's so easy to kind of avoid it and just to kind of focus on some of those fun things like shared hobbies or shared interests. But eventually you're going to have to get to a point where you do have these conversations because it's going to prevent a lot of conflict down the road. And so as you're dating, as you're kind of going through this, you're being safe, you're taking safe risks. You're not putting yourself in any harm or anything like that. Maybe you're starting to get into these worldview conversations. It's very important to be looking for warning signs. In any dating relationship, we have to be looking for warning signs. Now remember, nobody's perfect. We can't expect anybody to be perfect. You're not going to find a perfect person. We can't expect whoever we're dating to be like our own savior or our own little superhero or anything like that, right? But what we can expect, what we have to expect, what we must expect is for someone to treat us with respect. No matter what, we have to be looking for someone that treats us with respect. You are so valuable. You have so much worth. You cannot expect to find someone who doesn't treat you with respect. Each one of you who's watching this, you need to hear this today. If you are dating, do not waste your time with someone who doesn't value you, who doesn't see you for what you're worth, and treat you with respect. And there are a few ways to kind of identify some of these warning signs as you're going about your dating relationships.
Yeah, so one of the things you can do is just have people around you that you trust to kind of shine light into your life, into the person that you're dating. So it's important to have people around you that you trust that are also able to get to know your significant other. The reason being that when we get into a relationship with someone, especially in the beginning, we're often blinded by our feelings. It's kind of the puppy love stage, and we're only able to see their good traits and not the bad ones. So it's important to have people around you who can give you an unbiased opinion on the person that you're with. So for Jack and I, we were in the same group in church, and we had mutual friends there. So I had friends that I trusted that also knew Jack very well. So their approval of him and of our relationship was very important and very telling to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so whoever that may be for you, if you have a battle buddy, a friend here in the unit, who kind of knows you, who maybe sees who you're dating, they can speak into that. For me, when we first started dating, we were kind of both living in Kansas City. That's where I'm from. That's where my parents were living. And so for me, it's always been my mom. And my mom, she holds no punches. She'll tell it like it is. And so I knew that when she said, "Man, Maddie's a keeper. Maddie is awesome," that I was in the right place, doing the right things. And so it's so important to not only have that person who you trust to speak into your life, but to listen to that person. You know, if they're saying, "Hey, this is not a healthy relationship, this is not good," take that advice, take that wisdom, take that counsel from people that you trust, because they're looking out for your best interest. And just like Maddie said, sometimes when you're in those early stages of the relationship, you may not be able to see things clearly. You may not have that perspective that somebody from the outside will, who can see some of those warning signs. And so a few examples of warning signs to be on the lookout for is just one of the big ones is do they have a short temper? Are they someone who is ready to explode at any point in time? Are they someone who doesn't have patience with you? You know, everybody makes mistakes, and so we need to find someone that has that patience. I needed to find someone who had a lot of patience, trust me. And so is that person that you're dating, do they have that short temper? That person you're dating, do they take you seriously? Do they listen to your goals? Do they listen to your hopes, to your dreams? Those are conversations that Maddie and I had pretty early on. And, you know, where do we see ourselves in 5 years? Where do we see ourselves in 10 years? And so we both wanted to make sure that we, you know, respected and valued each other's goals. Another big warning sign, are they trying to isolate you? Isolation is not a healthy thing in any relationship, but especially as you're first dating. If they're trying to pull you out of your group of friends, if they're trying to pull you out of your family, if they're trying to keep you from communicating with other people, you know, that's a pretty big warning sign that they're going to be someone who's just looking to control you and who doesn't really have your best interests at heart. And then, of course, right, one of the biggest things to be on the lookout for, do they show signs of emotional, verbal, or physical abuse? Again, I want you to hear this. I want you to hear this clearly. You have so much value. You have so much self-worth. Do not let someone else tell you that you don't. Do not let someone else show you that you don't, because that's not true. And so if at any point in time you are experiencing in a dating relationship emotional, verbal, or physical abuse, you got to get out of it. And I know that it can be scary, and there are resources here. Feel free to come talk to me, and we'll get you the help that you need. But here's an important thing to remember, that you can't fix other people. You can't change other people. If they're showing those signs now, you can't expect them to change in the future. I always tell people, you know, and it was advice that was given to me, that the best predictor for future behavior is past behavior. If they've been showing these warning signs already in your relationship, there's no guarantee that they're going to change. And we can't expect us to change other people. And so even from the beginning points of a dating relationship, the bare minimum that you have to have is someone that respects you and that is someone that treats you as valuable and as with the self-worth that you deserve. And so, as you're going about this, maybe you think you found the right person, they passed the tests, other people affirm it, they're not showing these warning signs. It's time to really start to work on the relationship, putting that work in. And the biggest piece of work that we can put into any relationship is communication. Communication is crucial. It's a major key to any relationship, and it's important to establish healthy communication early on in the relationship. And I think just a few things, but one of the biggest things is face-to-face communication is key. There's no substitute for face-to-face communication. Right? We're living in a time where we have all this technology at our disposal. You know, we're living in a time where obviously texting is such a huge thing, and of course, texting, there's nothing necessarily wrong with texting, but a big question to ask yourself, you know, how much of the communication that you're doing with the person you're dating, how much of it is over the phone? How much of it is over social media? Because if you find yourself in a relationship where pretty much all of your communication is done via texting, via social media, you're not really developing the roots of that relationship, I would say. You're not really forming that real deep bond if everything is being done over technology. Now, I think there are ways to incorporate technology to develop really good communication habits. Things like if your lunch breaks line up, right, just giving them a call. Giving them a call in the middle of the day just to let them know, hey, thinking about you, how's your day going? Sending that text every once in a while just to keep people updated, or just to remind them that you're thinking about them. And maybe a little bit of old school ways to communicate is just writing a letter, leaving a note. Maddie still leaves me notes every once in a while. And when we were dating, there was a time where face-to-face communication wasn't necessarily possible. And just being in the military, right now I know just from talking with some of you, there's some people that are probably watching right now who they're dating someone who isn't local. And so with social distancing and with the travel restrictions and all of these things, right, face-to-face communication just isn't possible. And even as we get out of this pandemic, even as we come out on the other side, there are just times in the military where face-to-face communication isn't really a reality. It's not really a possibility. And so there are things that we can do to make sure that we're still having those good communication habits. And so Maddie's going to kind of talk about a time when I was at Bullock where face-to-face communication wasn't necessarily possible, but we found ways to still have that.
Yeah, so when Jack and I, we had only been dating for a month and a half or so before he had to go to Bullock, and that was for 3 months at Fort Jackson. And compared to a typical deployment, that's not very much time, but for a brand new couple, that seemed like forever. So, and we're from Kansas, so he was halfway across the country, and I wasn't able to go visit him. We weren't able to see each other in person at all. So we had to do what we could, and for us, that was Skyping, FaceTiming, and it wasn't ideal, but we were able to see each other and have conversations without actually being in person, and we were still able to grow in our relationship and talk about important things and even work through a little bit of conflict during that time. And I actually think it was good for us because we learned how to just talk to each other and hold a conversation without any distractions, and it was just us, and it was the small amount of time that we had to talk, and so we took advantage of that and we cherished that, and it helped us ultimately grow in our relationship. So yes, communicating in person is much better if you're able to, but if you can't do that, there's always other options, and you can make them work if the relationship is worth it to you.
Absolutely, and when I was at Bullock, we did have the opportunity to do FaceTiming and some of that stuff. I know that there are some soldiers in our formation right now where, you may be dating someone who's about to go through basic training or things like that where there's not really the option to FaceTime. And so something that Maddie and I did as well, we did write letters, and we kept them. We kept them to this day. And so, maybe if you're at a school or you're at a training event or something where FaceTiming is not possible, write the letters, handwrite the letter, because that's going to be really meaningful. And it's still finding that way to communicate. It's still finding that way to stay in touch, even though you may be physically apart. And so while we always try to do our best to communicate well, conflict is going to arise in any relationship, especially when you're dating. When you're dating, you're going from being your own individual person to now you're trying to do life together with somebody else. Conflict is going to arise. But I think that as you're dating and conflict arises, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it can be a good thing, because part of really good, healthy communication is learning to work through differences of opinion. It's learning to address conflict. It's learning to take some of those disagreements and bring them up instead of just pushing them down or trying to avoid them. Is working together to solve some of these issues that do arise. And I think dating is a great time to find out if that person is someone who, in the presence of conflict, is still going to treat you with respect, who is going to work together as a team, and who has still your best interests at heart. And so I think that sometimes, even though conflict is not necessarily fun, especially when you're dating, it can be really beneficial for your relationship. And so sometimes conflict, when handled the right way, can actually strengthen relationships.
Yeah, getting through conflict is something that can really strengthen a relationship if it's handled the right way. You get to know your partner better as you work through conflict, and you start to understand how they think and how they prefer to address conflict. It helps establish you as a team rather than as individuals as you learn to handle things together and compromise and put your partner's needs before your own. And then oftentimes you come out of the other side of a conflict with a sense of accomplishment because you know you just successfully got through something difficult and you still love your partner just the same, if not more. And I've found with us that we probably fight less now than we did when we were dating, just from our experiences going through conflict when we were dating. So, and I think when you're faced with some kind of adversity, sometimes it will lead to conflict within your relationship. But then later down the road, if you face that adversity again, if you face that external conflict again, you're better equipped to handle it as a team, and it may not cause conflict within your relationship this time.
Absolutely. And as just even with regular communication, especially during conflict, that face-to-face communication is always best, right? Think about how many arguments have arisen because someone didn't interpret the text the way that you intended it, or you didn't interpret the text the way that they intended it. And so having that face-to-face, or even if that's not possible, over the phone communication when handling conflict is going to best serve you and your relationship. And so as you get out and as you're dating, I hope that you're taking these cautious measures. I hope that you're looking for warning signs. I hope that you're learning to communicate effectively as you're dating and as you're looking for that one person to spend the rest of your life with. But no matter what and no matter where you are in a relationship, the two things that you cannot go without are trust and honesty. Trust that they're looking out for your best interests, that they're not in it for any selfish reasons. And honesty that you know who they really are and that they know who you really are. Because you don't want to enter into a marriage and all of a sudden find out, hey, that person is not who I thought they were. Or for them to look at you and say, hey, you're not who I thought you were, right? And so we want to be sure that as we're dating, we are setting the stage and we are showing trust and honesty throughout the whole time.
Yeah, you cannot have a relationship without trust and honesty. And if you're not being 100% honest with your partner, first of all, they're going to find out at some point. And once they find out that you weren't honest about just one thing, then you lose all the trust in your relationship. And that's really hard to get back. So without trust, a relationship will just deteriorate. And when two people trust each other, it creates a feeling of security that's super important in any relationship. They know that they can rely on each other and confide in each other, and you just have to be able to trust that your partner's going to be honest with you, and you have to be able to trust that they're on your side and they're not just going to up and leave you on a whim, and that's the security side of things. And if you don't have that, you end up with a feeling of uneasiness, and that can lead to conflict in the relationship.
Absolutely. And so, hey guys, thank you so much for joining us for our virtual date night. You know, we hope that by June, all of this stuff is going to be behind us, and we can come together and we can do the meal and we can do the activities and we can have that child care. But for now, we're so glad that we're still able to reach out to you online. And I want to encourage you, you know, if you have questions, if you have concerns, man, come talk to me, come talk to Rincon. We'd love to speak with you. And as well, we have plenty of resources in our office, different books, different things that may be able to help speak into a relationship that you're going through at this time. But thank you guys once again, and I hope you have a great evening.